In today's video, we're going to be doing another buy or sell video in Dynasty Fantasy Football, this time looking at Lions sophomore wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown after the amazing rookie season that he just had. So first things first, let's get into a little bit of background information because Amon-Ra is still a young player as he is 22 years old and won't turn 23 until late October. He is one of the younger wide receivers in the 2021 class. He's younger than Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle. He's basically the same age as Rashad Bateman and only a few months older than Jamar Chase and both of the Moores. He was also a pretty solid prospect analytically with an 18-year-old 20% breakout age, joining only Rashad Bateman and Rondale Moore as the only other receivers to have that freshman production in this class. And then he also had a 20-year-old 30% breakout age, which is great to see for some top-end production in college. And he was solid in yards per team pass attempt, team market shares, and athletically he came in okay as well with a 4.6140 at 6 foot 195 pounds. His only real red flag as a prospect was falling to the 4th round of the NFL draft, which was noted by some NFL teams that he just slipped through the cracks in a very deep wide receiver class. However, I would argue that the NFL missed on him kind of significantly since he had a day 2 grade from a lot of analysts out there and sites, and even in my process, he graded out better than a handful of wide receivers who were drafted ahead of him like Dwayne Eskridge, Amari Rodgers, Nico Collins, and Anthony Schwartz, and he should have been in the Terrace Marshall, Dyami Brown range at the 2-3 turn, not one of the last wide receivers drafted, which I think he showed with his amazing rookie season that he had in 2021. So let's move into why you should be buying Amon-Ra St. Brown in Dynasty. And I think obviously it is because of that production that he had in his rookie year. And now I know we can poke holes into that, and I will get to that in a bit. But as for right now, at face value, he was a top 24 wide receiver as a rookie with 90 receptions, 912 yards, and 6 total touchdowns on 119 targets. He was the 3rd best rookie wide receiver behind Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle. And yes, he was ahead of Devonta Smith. In fact, the difference between St. Brown as the wide receiver 23 and Jalen Waddle as the wide receiver 12 was smaller than the difference between him and wide receiver 30 Devonta Smith. That's how much he outperformed Devonta Smith as rookies. And as we all know, for wide receivers, rookie production is key for the ability to predict future success. And we know that face planners more often than not stay that way. And we know that high-end producers more often than not also stay that way. Since 2000, only 27 rookie wide receivers have eclipsed the 900 receiving yard mark, with 4 of that doing it this year. And this list includes players like Julio Jones, Andre Johnson, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, AJ Green, Mike Evans, and more recent players like AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, and Justin Jefferson. So from this list of 27 players, 96% of them have at least one wide receiver 2 season in their career, and 60% of them have a wide receiver 1 season. And looking at just the players between 900 to 1,000 receiving yards, of those 14 players, the only ones who didn't go on to have at least one top 24 season after their rookie year was Eddie Royal, and technically T. Higgins hasn't either, but I'm counting on him to hit on that one in the near future. And the list looks even stronger when you go by 90 or more receptions in their rookie season, which is a list of only 6 players, Waddle and St. Brown this year, and then Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham Jr., Eddie Royal again, and Anquan Bolden. And then finally, the list of players with 200 or more fantasy points is 23 players strong, with a lot of the usual names from before, and some new ones like Calvin Ridley, Chase Claypool, and Jordan Matthews. So as you can see at face value, St. Brown had a fantastic rookie season that should not be overlooked. But as I mentioned earlier, there are arguments being used to poke holes in that production, since over 60% of that production came in the final 6 games without DeAndre Swift or TJ Hawkinson for a handful of those games. So the argument basically is when those players are healthy again next year, St. Brown is not going to be what he was at the end of the year, which leads to the Brandon Aiyuk comparisons. And while I understand this argument, especially with such a fresh comparison in our minds as well, I do think that I have some holes that I can poke back into this argument. Right off the rip, yes, some of the games St. Brown exploded in were without Swift and Hawkinson, but he had elite production in games with one of them in during that late season stretch. In week 13, Hawkinson played and no Swift, but St. Brown had 12 targets, 10 receptions, 86 yards, and a touchdown. Week 17 and 18, DeAndre Swift was back without TJ Hawkinson, and St. Brown had 2 games with 8 receptions, over 100 receiving yards, and a touchdown in both of those games. And another point is St. Brown was also just playing more at the end of the season. Now, maybe this was because of no DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson, but honestly, like, do those two really affect how a wide receiver is playing in the snaps that a wide receiver is getting? Not to mention that we saw in the 3 games after the Lions bye week that St. Brown snaps went from 61% to 85% and then 98%, and Hawkins Swift played in all 3 of those games. So is it unreasonable to assume that things just started to click for a rookie wide receiver after half a season and after the team's bye week, like most rookie wide receivers? I would also like to add that I'm not saying that Swift and Hawkinson's absence didn't have an effect on St. Brown's production. I'm sure it did, especially because I would not expect him to average double-digit targets if those two were healthy and playing. But what I am saying is I think we saw a perfect storm of a rookie wide receiver starting to get going with the opportunity to shine as the guy on the Detroit Lions. And just because Swift and Hawkinson returning might mean regression for Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would not expect that regression to take him from elite to your bench as a back-end wide receiver 5 or 6, but rather elite to a good wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 flex option for you in your starting lineup. And Adam Harstead put it plainly on Cal Shoemake's show just a few days ago that it had to take a good player to be able to do what St. Brown did, which means that St. Brown is a good NFL wide receiver, and we need to recognize that.
It's not like just because there's a void, somebody will inevitably fill it. You have to be good. I mean, you could look at Anquan Bolden, his rookie year, and there were a lot of criticisms. Well, who else do the Cardinals have to throw to? Just because they have no one else to throw to doesn't mean you're going to have one of the best rookie seasons in history.
But let's talk about why you should sell St. Brown, because there are a couple more concerns that I still have moving forward. And I know I just said that I'm not worried about his production with a healthy DeAndre Swift and with a healthy TJ Hawkinson moving forward. However, I am worried that the Detroit Lions are going to add more talent around St. Brown at the wide receiver position, either through free agency or the draft. That, to me, is a legitimate target share concern. If they were to sign someone in free agency like a Mike Williams or a DJ Chark as an outside receiver, and or draft a rookie with their second first-round pick or at their early second at 34 overall. And I have already seen a wide variety of receivers mocked to the Detroit Lions with that late first-round pick. Guys like Chris Olave, David Bell, Jahan Dotson, Jameson Williams. I've even seen one where they take Jameson Williams and Jahan Dotson at 32 and 34 overall. So more wide receivers could be bad for St. Brown moving forward. And then another point to add is while I personally don't view it as a problem, considering how well he played as a rookie, St. Brown was a 4th-round pick, and we have seen NFL teams quickly replace or at least find competition for day 3 producers. And the reason why I don't see that as an issue is, like I said already, it was his production that is going to keep him on the field. And we have also seen day 3 receivers who have produced stick around, and they are harder to replace than a day 3 running back, for example, like in Elijah Mitchell. We saw guys like Stephon Diggs, Marvin Jones, Doug Baldwin, Jamison Crowder, Hunter Renfrow. All these guys were all day 3 or even undrafted and produced well consistently that they had to be involved in whatever offense they were in. But because he was a 4th rounder, we'll just call it like a light yellow flag on his resume for now. Finally, I think we also need to consider his team and how he produces for fantasy. We know that the Detroit Lions are not going to be very good unless something crazy happens at quarterback and they find another Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, which I don't think happens in this class, or at least I don't think the Detroit Lions finds that player in this class. So under the assumption the Lions are a 5-win team at best over the next couple of years, St. Brown will not be making any of his fantasy points really from touchdowns, as we saw this year with just 5 receiving scores. So since 2000, of the 316 individual receiver seasons where a player has had over 100 targets but 5 or fewer touchdowns, only 17 of them finished inside the top 12. 17 out of 316. That is 5% of those wide receivers to do that. And basically, those wide receivers needed 100 plus, if not 110 plus receptions and 1,200 or more yards with that handful of touchdowns. So these were elite wide receiver PPR seasons, like a Jarvis Landry Dolphins type of season. So what that shows is St. Brown's ceiling is extremely capped for fantasy, unless he were to have some like crazy 150 target season. But even then, his ceiling is like wide receiver 10. He's not going to put up some monstrous top 5 fantasy season without something drastic happening for him. So then a lot of the other 299 seasons from this sample looked a lot like what we already saw from St. Brown in 2021, which was 120-ish targets, 90-ish receptions, and around 1,000 yards gets you to a mid to back end wide receiver 2, with only those 4 or 5 touchdowns. And that's where St. Brown is going to live, which is fine. It's more than fine, actually, as just a solid, reliable wide receiver 2 in fantasy, or preferably wide receiver 3 on your team. So as long as you know that and those are the expectations and the price that you are paying for him, you should be fine. Otherwise, you're probably going to get burned. So speaking of price, let's take a look at where St. Brown is currently valued in Dynasty, because in January DLF ADP, he is actually moderately valued as the wide receiver 25, just behind Michael Pittman, Jerry Jeudy, Mike Evans, and Chase Claypool, and ahead of, coincidentally, Brandon Aiyuk, and then also Hollywood Brown, Amari Cooper, and DeAndre Hopkins. So he's basically right on the border of hopeful young guys and old but still producing guys. And it will be interesting to see where he is in February ADP, since that will incorporate 2022 rookies for the first time this year. But I expect him to be behind a couple of rookie wide receivers, guys like Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, maybe 1 or 2 more, which could possibly drop St. Brown closer to that wide receiver 30 overall. So using the DLF Trade Finder, I found a few recent trades as examples of what I would like to buy St. Brown for, like Darren Waller for Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jerry Jeudy for St. Brown in a third, Pat Freiermuth for St. Brown, Zach Wilson and Terrace Marshall for St. Brown and the 111 in a Superflex league. And then this one, which is essentially the 109 and a 2024 first for St. Brown, Pat Freiermuth, Michael Carter, and the 2.05. And then there are examples of trades that I would like to sell St. Brown for, like St. Brown and the 110 for Stephon Diggs, St. Brown straight up for Josh Jacobs, St. Brown straight up again for DJ Moore, St. Brown and the 1.08 and 1.09 for Cooper Kupp, and then also St. Brown and Devonta Smith for Cooper Kupp. And when it comes to just one 2022 first round pick, I would set the bar probably right around the 1.07 in one quarterback leagues, where anything higher than that is a sell and anything lower than that is a buy. And in Superflex, that drops down to about the 109 and 110 to account for a couple of those quarterbacks. So let me know down in the comments if you guys are buying or selling Amon-Ra St. Brown in Dynasty, and if this video helped you decide one way or another. And also tell me if there are any players that you would like to see in a buy sell video just like this one. I have my list from the previous video on Elijah Mitchell, which Amon-Ra St. Brown was actually a suggested player from. So if you have a guy that you want to see, put him down in the comments. And if you missed the aforementioned video on Elijah Mitchell or the one that I did on Cooper Kupp as well, you can click right over here and watch either one of those. And with that being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch y'all later.